much for joining me here. This is obviously, as a woman in my 40s, a topic that's quite close to heart. And I think I ventured into the health and longevity space 8 years ago, coming from an advertising entrepreneurial background. And honestly, I didn't know very much about women's health. I didn't know very much about my cycle. I had been taking the pill, the contraception pills. I had a spiral, which is another word in English that right now left my mind.
IUD.
IUD. Thank you. So my cycle was not really something that I have felt throughout my life. And hitting perimenopause was definitely not something I had any knowledge or awareness about. And this is really the point of us being here. I think I realized how much we need to create more insights, share more knowledge, and really help women understand the foundation of how we function. And we are a little bit different than men. And there are some phases in our lives that impacts us quite severely. Perimenopause, menopause being one of them. And this is what we're going to deep dive into today. So thank you so much for joining. I think I will start asking, because one of the things about menopause and perimenopause is it is actually quite a lot of women that are impacted by this. And not necessarily, I think menopause as the kind of few years is something that is quite talked about, but usually also related to hot flashes and a very kind of physical symptoms. Not so much is being spoken about perimenopause and all the sleep issues, which is for many where it starts, but a lot of women are actually impacted by this. And I think without knowing what is creating these changes in us, it can be super hard to actually then, what are the right tools, what's the right strategy, how do you empower yourself through this? And this is what we're going to talk about. But Dorthe, can you put a few words on what's your experience? How many women are actually struggling with this?
Yes, of course, and thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and the rest of the team. In my clinic, I only see the probably severe or moderate cases, but in general, roughly 1/3 will go through menopause and not experience anything else, but the period stops. So they don't really have that big impact in the body. Of course, there is the smaller things inside the vessels and the bones and everything, but they don't have any symptoms. And then there's the second third. I would say they have moderate symptoms, which means that they can feel something is going on. They have hot flashes, they feel dryness, they have something, but most of them will accept these changes, and they are not affecting their everyday life. Some of them will come, for example, in a clinic, seeing a gynecologist, because what can I do to optimize? What can I make sure that it won't get worse? I'm feeling something now, what is going on? And then there's the last third, which have severe symptoms. They are affected to a degree where it's their quality of life, and those are the ones that say no to the new job, or they would have more sick leave days where they don't feel that they function as well as they could be. They feel the brain fog, they sleep so poorly, so they have so many symptoms physically and psychologically that causes the quality of life to be at a point where I think it's a mistake not to treat them.
And on top of that, because you see the women that actually go and seek help, how many do we actually have out there that have symptoms, not necessarily know what it is, and maybe don't know where to go?
Yeah.
I think that's also something I would love for the rest of the panel to elaborate on.
Yes, well, I'm pretty blessed with only seeing clients who know that their symptoms could be menopausal or perimenopausal, because I do online consultations and courses, and I'm in private practice, so I definitely see a bit of a different group. But I also see that more and more now are getting interested in those symptoms that occur when we're in perimenopause. I'm not yet menopausal. I'm only starting the first bit of perimenopause now myself, but I see a lot of women who are decoding all of the symptoms that they have, and now being more aware that these symptoms are hormonal. So like anxiety, sleep deprivation, insomnia, all of this, the pains and aches and joint problems, less collagen production also, from the decline in estrogen, because your ovaries actually start producing inflammatory cytokines when you go through perimenopause and when you're into menopause. So it's kind of actually an inflammatory state, and that affects everything. And your hormones, the declining hormones, also affects your neurotransmitters. So it affects the GABA receptor. It affects your serotonergic system, which also creates the hot flashes. So it's a body system that you have to look into. And more women are getting more and more aware that these symptoms are connected to your hormones, and not just what the heck is going on.
It's not necessarily stress.
It's not necessarily stress.
No.
So I think, thank you for having me, and I think my profile is very much different from yours because I'm not a healthcare practitioner, so this is basically my own experience. I started off, so when I first discovered my menopause symptoms, I was quite successful at my career. I was end 30s, beginning 40s. I was at Harvard University. I was studying decision science. So for me, that was an exciting time. But having those symptoms interrupt my plan for what I wanted to do with my life was actually quite disturbing. So for me, that was a much different journey, where I decided at one point that instead of continuing the path I was on, to start to focus on what can I do with the research background I have to understand what's happening internally in my body. And also because, to be honest, I didn't understand where to start. I also had thyroid problems, so I thought maybe that's it. So the confusion is real. So I stopped my career. It was also during Corona time, and came back to Denmark to look into what can I do with my background as a decision theorist and behavior science to hack my own system. And out of that came several ideas. I lost about 40 kilos. I got my symptoms under control and built a business around that. So it was a productive time, but it was, the offspring of it was really a need to change something and having no outlet to where to go, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that happens for many women in that phase, and we see it. You have women on the height of their career, and all of a sudden they quit their job and they start, become a yoga teacher or some, in lack of a better example, but completely shift, which can also, by all means, be a great thing and beneficial, and maybe that was their dream and always have been. But I think there's also a group of women that make these dramatic changes, whether it's career or in their private lives, and then realize a few years later, okay, actually it was a phase. It was something that I didn't recognize myself. I felt differently. Okay, but there, if you don't know what it is and how to work around it, I think that's where it becomes, it takes over and guides you instead of you guiding it. And I think I would love to change the narrative on perimenopause and menopause and brand it differently. Find another name, please.
And also, 1/3 of all antidepressants are prescribed to women in this phase. And I don't think that is
It's not
true.
depressant,
No,
right?
it's not a depression. And they say, I don't feel myself. But that doesn't mean you're necessarily in need of antidepressive. So looking back, they often say, well, it wasn't a depression, it was my menopause or perimenopause. And you can be in that phase and still have your period, so you can't really use that. I want to, let's not say anymore that as long as you have a period, you can't be in menopause, because that's just simply not true. And if we can focus on the phase up till the last period, that's where the symptoms very often have a higher amplitude, and it's a roller coaster ride.
Exactly, and I think that's where we need, as women, needs to be empowered and have the knowledge to know if you go to your doctor and say, I am feeling bad, and oh, you still have your periods, then it's fine. You're just, no, that's not acceptable, because if you have symptoms, it's a sign your body sends to you, and there is something you can do about it. Yes, we cannot change that we as women will have this complete decline in hormones. That is a nature, a given, but we can still change the way we prepare ourselves for this phase. And I think that's also, I'm curious, also you are actually caretakers in this space. Like, how do you prepare yourself early on in this phase to go empowered through this transition in life?
Through with knowledge. I think that's why I'm so keen on sharing all my knowledge, because I've been to the university, I've done a PhD, all this knowledge needs to come out for all women to know and implement in their own perspective. So every woman has their own menopause. So it's not something that we can, just say, you just need this treatment. It has to be individualized. And with that in mind, it's a lot about, I can do something with the prescriptions. They might need hormonal therapy, but there's also a lot of things, like you mentioned, you can do yourself in terms of diet, in terms of being physical active. And I think what you have, how you've been treating your body up until this point, it's just not working anymore, because your metabolism changed, your sleep, your mood, everything, your bone, your vessels. And if you think you can continue the same life without having to do some adjustment, I think it's a sad situation, and you might get too far out, and then you see you can't take care of your job anymore. So it's the reverse puberty, and since that was also a hormonal imbalance, I think we should look at this as, with the knowledge I need to have, what can I use in my personal life? How many adjustments can I make with my physics, my sleep, and with all the knowledge I can gain? Then from there on, I can make my best judgment of the right solution. It might be hormonal therapy, but it doesn't have to be. There's a lot of things you can do in terms of lifestyle.
Yes, well, the same thing I was going to say. But also, I like the word you used, the transition. Maybe we should just call it a transition, because it is what it is. It's a period and a life phase that transcends everything in your body changes. Every cell changes. Every way that the body can communicate internally changes. And I think in our eager to kind of treat the symptoms and listen to all the women who feel these really immense symptoms, we kind of forget that maybe to look behind the symptoms sometimes. When you say, women become so much more angry or so much more sad, they get a depressive disorder, but maybe that's not it. Maybe they were rightfully angry all that time. But when you have a lot of estrogen in your body in the productive years, estrogen kind of soothes your brain, so you put up with a lot more shit. And then, when we get older and wiser, estrogen also declines. So, you cannot fuck with us at this stage of life, and we won't put up with so much. And those higher estrogen levels forms the brain in our productive years, so that we can be better at taking care of others. We become better caregivers, and that has a purpose in that phase of life, to take care of everybody else. But I think that the shift is, when you become older, you have to learn to take care of yourself instead. Look at your stress levels, because your cortisol goes up continuously as you get older, and that would just make menopause symptoms a lot worse. But if you nurture your body and you know what's going on biochemically, and you know which symptoms comes from what, it gets so much easier to take care of yourself, but also be angry about all the shit that women have to put up with.
So a little angry outlet can be good.
Yeah,
for sure.
Ventilate.
That's important always. Yeah. Yes. Sally?
So I think it's it's really uplifting to hear words like transition, inflammation, lifestyle. I really love that because when I started experiencing my symptoms, the first thing I was thrown at me was, oh, you need bioidentical hormones. And definitely I'm quite a fan of hormones. I think hormone replacement therapy could definitely work. But my problem was that I needed a foundation. So what I discovered was when I started with hormone replacement therapy or bioidentical hormones, everything got messed up. And that was such a terrible period for me on top of going through those symptoms. So I took everything out and I basically realized my body is at this point very depleted. So I can't really do anything before starting to work on the foundation of my body. So that was the first step for me. So I had this 5-step plan. And the first step was basically to have the foundation in place. So what about blood sugar? What about protein intake? What about strength training? What about sleep? So get that in place, that was the first step for me. Just do what I can and build up from there. And for me, because I'm quite competitive, I decided I wanted to enter the Danish championships in powerlifting. So I did that, so that was a really motivator for me to get that foundation in place. And then afterwards, for me, it was like build muscle because I knew that I had lost a lot of muscle, and muscle does so much. I mean, we're thinking about these bodybuilders, but muscles protect our mood. It protects our metabolism, our brain. So for me, it was really important to build that muscle. And I think so my power lifting or deadlifting record right now is 120 kilos. And I don't really look like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so I think that thread is not there. We're not going to look masculine. It's actually going to be quite nice for us. So that was important for me. And then know my body, like, track everything, track my sleep, track my cycles. And I know, so my cycle is unfortunately on point. So my doctor keeps telling me you're not in perimenopause or menopause, but I know that the symptoms are there. And then support my nervous system. So basically breathing, relaxation, the cortisol you're talking about. So all this, and then realizing that I can't do this alone. So what I did was, so I hate cardio training. I really like lifting. So I decided to gather all my friends and train them. And I did that for 3 years, which basically made me in a really good shape. But that was important for me to share that experience with someone else. So for me, that was the 5-step plan. And when I did that, then on top of that, I could start to look into, so now what I need, what sort of nutritions would I need that are targeted? What sort of hormones would I need that are targeted? But if the foundation is not in place, you're just going to be in a, at least that's my experience, I'm not a practitioner, you're just going to be in a shitty place for a long time and not knowing why. So that needs to go. And I really hope that with the conversation and with the knowledge, that is going to go out there, get the foundation in place. Without sleep, nutrition, and training, it's like, it's all shit.
Thank you so much for sharing and very inspiring, Sally. Pointing on, and you mentioned it briefly before, things do change. And I think that's also one thing is the foundation, but you can have been a woman who had a really strong foundation, been in great shape, never had issues with weight gain or, always been energetic, and all of a sudden that changes. And I think that's also something important because what I see a lot with many women coming to us is then they do what they always have done. So low-calorie diet, much more adrenaline-kicking workouts. And actually, in this phase, our system will just go completely into survival mode. We should not add any more pressure. But this is what we know because this is the tools we have and they used to work. So why shouldn't we do what we always done? And I think there's also some insights on understanding that things are changing. And me, for example, I wear this glucose monitor once a year to kind of test my blood sugar level. Stable blood sugar is super important for all of us. And all of a sudden this year, I realized, I constantly, I don't spike, I go too low blood sugar, which hits me at night. So I will wake up at night. And then when you're in a perimenopause, your sleep is maybe not perfect to begin with. So then you wake up, maybe because of the blood sugar, and then your mind starts going crazy and your sleep is fucked. And then all the things that follows that. So I realized, okay, proteins. And it's hard to get so many proteins. I have, for the first time in my life, I'm taking protein powder and, to really get enough. So I think it's also that understanding that even though, and I've always been very healthy and very known exactly what to eat and what to do and always worked out, I just realized, okay, I need to change something now. My foundation and what I used, the toolbox I used to have, is no longer working. And that is also, I think, something that's really important in this phase, because yes, muscle mass, proteins, really the whole nervous system stress regulation just becomes so much more important. And so I would love to also for you guys to touch upon that a bit more.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
So much to
you
say.
go first.
Well, I definitely think that nutrition is immensely important, but I also think what's more important than nutrition is nurturing. So, because you can do all of the right things, but if you do it from a wrong sentiment, or you do it to kind of punish yourself to get your body into shape and do all the right things, then it's not going to have the same effect, because it will just raise your adrenaline and raise your cortisol and you're in survival mode. But if you do it from a perspective where you have love for your body and you do it to nurture your body and to have compassion with your body, it's going to have a completely different effect, because you're going to raise your oxytocin. You know, oxytocin almost cures everything, at least on social media. If you see the post there, it's not quite the same scientifically, but it sounds good. But if you can do it from a sentiment of love for your own body and from the understanding of your body's needs, not your brain's needs or your career's needs, but what your body truly needs, it will have a completely different effect. And there is the thing that if you just go all protein, high protein diets, but if you're chronically stressed and you starve yourself from carbohydrates and go doing cardio, not cardiac, then you can actually turn some of that protein into glucose anyway via gluconeogenesis. So there's a lot of perspective to it. So it's not just always eat more protein. It's look at your whole diet and also get more starchy carbohydrates, more nutrients in general. But yeah, the protein stuff is pretty important, but also the chocolate.
Also chocolate, I love that. And I know you're going to say orgasm in a little
Yes.
while. As well, oxytocin. Yes.
But I totally agree. But when they come in a clinic like mine, they tried everything. They are depleted. And there is a balance between what can I ask more of her. So there is nothing more to do, to give. She's really, flat on the ground. She cannot obtain her just everyday life. And I think also we've been scared of hormones for many years, but now when we look into it, if you carry yourself wisely, and then we shouldn't be so afraid of hormones. So sometimes, reversely of what your 5-step plan, which also sounds really great, sometimes I start them with hormones so they do sleep again, so they do feel more calmness, they don't have these heart palpitations, the hot flashes go away, they actually sleep. And when I say that, when we have this conversation in my clinic, I say, once you start feeling better, then please promise me that this energy that it enhances, please give it back to yourself. So it's nice that you are there for your children and your career and your husband and everything else, but once you sleep again and once you feel better, make sure that the energy and the this has to be for your own sake. So the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can give it to everyone else.
And sorry.
So just one comment to that, because I think it's definitely true that once you hit this phase, the old strategies don't really work anymore. I mean, I remember I was on every single diet you could think of, like cabbage diet. Who came up with that? That's just punishment. Like, no orgasms in that. But I think so. Something I realized during that phase was that it's so odd that women as whole have. I don't know how it happened, but suddenly it happened that the success criteria for us was strategies for diminishing.
Yes.
Like, lose yourself, lose weight, become smaller, take less space. Like, why is that a strategy? And I know that definitely being overweight, that was basically part of the plan, but realizing that that can't really be the end goal, and all the strategies supporting that cardio training, eating less food, going to bed hungry, or cutting out all carbs.
Yes.
That didn't really work. And just refocusing on what would nurture my body. I mean, how do I feel when I eat this? And being a researcher in habits and behavior, I knew that no habit will stick if there is no dopamine in there. So if you don't enjoy it, you can continue to repeat the habit 90 days, 120 days, whatever, rocks your boat. The habit will not stick because new, paths in your brain are not being formed. Dopamine is very essential part of that. So that was really something I discovered, that dopamine needs to be a part of this. So everything I do needs to be combined with some sort of enjoyment so that it sticks.
And I think this points to also across what you're saying, that it's not one size fits all. It's really an individual strategy, and we are all individual beings. We come from a different starting point, different vantage point, different lifestyle, and it is truly important to understand maybe that as the first stepping stone, because you're dealing with clients in one phase and patients that are have very severe symptoms at most, and there can be some of us that has lesser symptoms but really wants to try and do it from a lifestyle perspective. But I would still love to touch upon the hormonal part, because it has been a little bit of a misconception, I would say. I think there's been for many, many years talks about all the risk, but maybe not put in context. There's this old study, and you can tell more about it, but that kind of diverted that whole field for quite a few years. It's changing, and that's really great. But I think there's also a bit of understanding in what are the risks that we women face, not necessarily when we're 55 or 60, but when we're 70, 80, and 90. And that goes back to how do we actually transition to this phase in life, in our midlife, in our 50s. And I think that is also something we should know about. So when we do take a choice whether we want to do hormone therapy or not, it should be an informed choice and an empowered choice, where also knowing not just the short-term benefits or risk, but also really the long-term. Because looking at the stats, as women, we live longer than our male counterparts, but we live up to 25% of our lives with chronic disease. That is a hell of a lot of years not feeling well. So again, can we prevent some of that through hormone therapy? Open question.
Yes, of course we can. Done wisely, done when the women is in a healthy place. Because we know from the old study, 2002, Women Health Initiative, we thought giving it to everyone would help. But then we found out that there are some risks. So we can't just give it to everyone. We need to maintain and take care of ourselves. So in terms of cholesterol and BMI and cardiovascular risks in general, and the breast cancer risk. So all of these things put together, we make an individual choice. And that's exactly my information. So I'm here to inform all of the risk and put it for you to decide what is right for you. So we do it as in a consultation where we both agree on what's right for her. So we have a higher risk of cardiovascular diseases without our estrogen, because our estrogen is working in all organs and all parts of our body, and this is the number one killer for women, is cardiovascular disease. So this is highly important because our symptoms are different than men. So understanding how estrogen can make the vessels more flexible and lower this risk is super important for our long term. So living 40% of our lives in menopause and after is so huge amount of time that thinking wisely, like you said, doing it maybe just a little bit to help the body, not overdoing it, and it's very individualized how much you need, but I would definitely say estrogen through the skin, so we lower the blood clot risk. Instead of taking it orally, then it's metabolized over the liver, and a little bit higher risk there. So we preferred through the skin. And progesterone for relaxation, for sleeping well, and all of this cognitive functions. It's really, really good and
Orally.
yeah,
progesterone.
progesterone orally, yes, definitely, because then it metabolizes and crosses the blood-brain barrier and connects to the GABA receptors for the sleep and parasympathetic system. So these hormones, I think, are important to look into because of our general health as getting older, definitely.
You want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to add a tiny bit. I can see that we're running out of time, but
We have time,
we can
and there's
talk
also time
forever.
for questions after. Yeah.
Prep, not just for everything. Prepping is such a popular word nowadays, but prep for menopause, not in a militant way, but know your body, know your individual risk factors, get help from a practitioner before all of these changes happen. There's a theory called the adrenal theory, because after you hit menopause, your adrenals can still do some of the hormones that you need. We can convert some of our stress hormones into progesterone and estrogens and androgens. But that's all we have, and it's not at all at the same level that we had before in the productive years. But if you kind of use those hormones to make stress hormones instead, then you don't have that tiny source that you still make post-menopause because you've been draining your system for too long.
The pathway has changed, right?
The pathways have changed, yes.
Yeah.
So you have to take better care of yourself, get to know yourself, and prep before you get those symptoms. Up your muscle mass, up your game, and take care of your nervous system. And then, of course, eat more chocolate and have more orgasms.
I love it. And I think that is also very important to remember. There's balance in everything. And enjoying life is such a big part of also our health and well-being. Let's not forget that. Between all the regimes and hormones and supplements and all the good things
and
we
do
can
it
also
with your
do.
friends,
Yeah,
Yeah, the
That's
community.
a great hack, the community.
Yeah.
Instead of drinking wet wine all the time, go swimming in the ocean and go weightlifting with your friends instead.
Do sauna and ice plunging.
Yes.
Also with mindfulness anyways, but
Also with wine.
yes, and with wine.
And chocolate.
I think the key takeaway here is, be curious, start early on, seek knowledge, you're already here, so you are definitely on the right path. But I think the earlier the better, because again, and also understanding like our foundation will also be the one that carry us into this transition. So if we have imbalances and deficiencies, obviously we will feel them stronger and the symptoms stronger throughout perimenopause and menopause. So it is a great way not just to empower yourself through the transition, but also for all the years to come after. And remember, our bodies were not built to be as old as we get today. So it is something we need to change strategy a little bit and see it from a different perspective. And again, balance. Lifestyle is one thing. Hormone is definitely also can help, but I think also hormone is, again, not medicine or a pill you just take and then it fixes everything. It's part of a bigger picture and part of should be part of more your lifestyle changes, rituals, and maybe supported if that's what you choose. But I know we have a few minutes if there are any questions. And I will give my mic away, so you will have to answer, girls.
Thank you so much for the panel discussion. This is really helpful. I'm just wondering if you could comment, please, and this is for Dorthe, around bioidentical hormones and whether that is truly an advantage if the research supports that, or if this is just what we're reading and it's fad at the moment.
Well, yes, and thank you for the question. I'm all for bioidentical hormones because, of course, they are more similar to what the body has already. So for estrogen, we almost only treat with estradiol, E2, so that's the more potent one. You can also treat locally with estriol, that's the E3, that's not as potent, but again, that is helpful for dryness. And so it's only in terms of contraceptive use, we have this ethylene group on the estrogen, but in menopause, we often or mostly just use the bioidentical estradiol. And in terms of progesterone, I'm all in favor of the the bioidentical tablet. We only have one here in Denmark, and that's the benefit, not only protecting the endometrial lining of the uterus, but it also across the blood-brain barrier and it helps you sleep better. And that's a huge advantage. So I think if you are in perimenopause and have the need for contraceptive, a hormonal IUD is definitely something you can use because it's locally and you'll have the contraceptive aspect of it. But if you use the bioidentical progesterone, it's not as strong, so it cannot work as contraceptive. So, but of course, I don't see a point in the 52-year-old woman having an IUD anymore. I would definitely choose the bioidentical progesterone. Yeah. So, and also in terms of breast cancer issues, I'm all for that. Done individually, of course, if she has a contraceptive need or not.
And that is actually the standard care practice in Denmark, bioidentical hormones. A lot of people think that bioidentical hormones are what you buy on the internet or common lotions, but standard care is also bioidentical hormones when it comes to treating menopausal symptoms.
Yeah, and I am in the Danish guideline group now. So I and some others, we are writing the Danish national guideline now for treating menopause. And of course we look into this. But one small issue about the bioidentical progesterone is the lack of enough years with research, because that's a frustration in general. Not enough research has been done on women. So we lack still the long-term consequences. So, and of course the hormonal IUD has been on the market for a longer time, but if you have the possibility of an ultrascan, then you can check the endometrial lining. So you constantly are aware of the balance between not taking too much estrogen to protect the uterus from endometrial cancer. But bioidentical, definitely.
Hello, good afternoon. I have a question about the MTHFR mutation. Is HRT suggested or allowed to women with the mutation or not?
Is that the BRCA?
Yeah. No, it's not the BRCA. It's the MTFHR. It's a methionine something, I don't know the name in English. This is just the...
maybe you don't test for that, we test for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but it's not a general
No.
healthcare...
Yeah,
but
it's
that's
like
what we do.
When the inflammatory title in the body is super high and so...
And it has to do with methylation and what you do when
absolutely.
you have to... But the actually real big motherfucker here is the COMT, the COMT gene, because that's what helps not breaking down, but attaching methylene groups to the estrogen when you've already metabolized it. And I have that variation myself, so yeah. And that's what we do when we do functional testing. When I have menopausal clients that take HRT, we test them not before maybe with a DNA test before they start, so we can see if it's applicable, but also with functional testing if they started. We test them while they're on estradiol therapy, so you can test for the metabolites and see if the methylation pathways are functioning properly. And that would kind of optimize hormone therapy, so it's a small percentage that will have consequences from estrogen metabolism. I think it's 0.4, so it's not a lot. But you can actually test that and look into if the genetics, your individual genetics, will affect that risk for you. Also histamines. Always look at histamine intolerances before you venture.
I think we are kind of okay. One last question, and then I think we have to. Then maybe the panelists will go up here, and I'm sure they will answer a few more questions in person. But let's take a final one.
I'm 42, been experiencing perimenopausal symptoms, so I've been going down the rabbit hole of this. There's lots of talk about estrogen and progesterone, but I've heard that it could be a testosterone, imbalance as well. What are your thoughts on that? What is the rules in Denmark? And is there a natural alternative that we can go down to increasing your testosterone, or at least finding out, is this the problem? Only because when I remember in my teens, estrogen and progesterone was not good for me. Contraceptive pill, can't do. So I'm thinking probably not a good idea now too. What are your thoughts?
Well, testosterone in Denmark, I mean, worldwide it's been very popular to talk about, and we don't have any good studies on women taking testosterone, but I measure it in my clinic. I do take the blood sample to see where is the level, and of course testosterone is important. We also produce that and lose it in menopause. So in Denmark, it's a gray zone. It's allowed for the lack of libido, but in terms of strength, in terms of empowerment and feeling like you can conquer the world, we're not allowed to give it. But I give it in my clinic for some women, but I never really start with testosterone because often, and many symptoms will be less starting with progesterone and estrogen, but if it's not enough and if the testosterone is low, it's definitely something that I consult and we have a talk about, because since we don't know the long-term consequences, we don't really know if it's safe enough. And from men, we have some studies, and there are some studies saying that the heart and the liver can be affected, but it's also a matter of dose. So it will help the libido once, but if you're too high, then it will have the opposite effect. So it's a...
I love it because I know you two and you can talk forever about these things. So I'm sorry to cut in a little bit.
Okay.
You want the final remark?
Yes, the final remark, the last bit of it is that all of the steroid hormones, like the sex steroid hormones and or stress hormones, they come from the same substance. So you have to look into the whole puzzle, because your estrogen is produced from your testosterone, but your testosterone is also converted into DHT, which is another male hormone. But it's so important to look into all of the pathways, what's affecting those enzymes that convert your steroids all over the system, because it could also be low DHEA. And if you don't have enough DHEA, which is pretty normal, and we're the same age, it drops and cortisol goes up, and then you don't have the substance to make testosterone. So you can add testosterone, but I think it's better to fix the problem. And if the problem is actually you're overtaxing DHEA to counter stress in your life, then that's where we need to look, because I'm a root cause kind of girl. So yes.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your questions and listening. I hope it was inspiring for everyone. Thank you for participating.
Of course.
And I'm sure you can catch all three of you up here or over there, sorry. And then enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And I want to say, if you need a little change of sitting here and listening, there's an amazing breathwork ecstatic dance that's going to end this day on the experience stage. So I would highly recommend going over there within the next 30 minutes.